Welcome to the Elevating La Cultura podcast, a space where I talk with Latinas who are passionate about what they do and are willing to share that passion with others to change the narrative, especially for the next generation. Each season is centered around different topics, but all with a Latina perspective. Welcome to Season 8, where we will talk all things corporate and higher education. I'm so excited to share these powerful stories. So vámonos, and let's get into it. Hola! Today I'm talking with a Chicago amiga. Aide is a Sociology Ph.D. candidate. Her work explores the experiences of Latina graduate students, including the challenges they encounter and the supports they utilize. She is a higher education content creator that shares her experiences as a Latina Ph.D. and has built an online community with other Latinas across different disciplines and careers. As a Chicago native, she co-hosts events across the city to bring Latinas together. Enjoy our conversation. Hi, I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. I have been following you on social media for a while, and I was really excited to meet you in person this summer at a social rooftop event. And yeah, I'm just thankful that you can come on the podcast and share your story and your experience. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Of course. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Aide Hernández, and I'm a PhD sociology student. I'm a first generation Latina graduate student, and I share my experience of what it's like to be in academia on social media.
I think it's so inspiring to follow along on someone else's journey. I think that's what I like about social media is that, like, yes, you can get sucked in and spend too much time on social media, but I think that when you start following people and hear their story and hear their journey, it's like you can cheer them on like from afar or like feel like you have that connection. And so I know that when we met, like I felt like I knew you already and could be excited for all that you're doing. And so I hope it wasn't too weird that I was like, oh yeah, I know you, I follow you. But that's what I like about social media is that you can not only inspire and share life with like your close circle, but you can also extend that out. And so I am curious as to what brought you to being able to share so much on social media, because I'm sure it's not easy as well, like sharing the ups and downs while you're going through it.
Yeah, definitely. I think a little bit of background as to I think what eventually led me to where I am is I was really involved as a community organizer when I was in high school and undergrad. And so I never thought of myself as being very shy, but I was also not one to go up in front of large groups of people and talk about something. And so I was really passionate, still am, about community organizing in Chicago. I grew up in Logan Square, which is now heavily gentrified. And so a lot of my, I would say, confidence and just passion for knowledge sharing and education came from working and grassroots organizing, showing up at protests, doing press conferences and stuff like that. And so I think that really built my confidence. And in education as well, I've always really been passionate about going to college and just being in a classroom setting and discussing a lot of things that are happening in the world. And so I think as I as I finished my undergrad and I sort of thought about what were the next steps, I went to get my master's in social work, and I kind of figured that I didn't want to go into practice at the time that I finished my master's. And so I went into a PhD program. I've been in school back to back for so long. And within my PhD program, I recognized that there was a lot of funneling of students of color, specifically women of color. And I felt heavily unrepresented, although my program is pretty diverse in itself. I still didn't feel the representation that I've always felt growing up in Chicago, growing up in predominantly Mexican neighborhoods, going to Chicago public schools. And so I really wanted to do what I was doing on in organizing, but on social media and like reaching a larger audience. And so going back to organizing, I would always have these open discussions online. I would always reshare resources about things that were going on in the community. And so I always considered my page to be a public space where I was sharing this knowledge and helping educate people about things that were going on in our community and in the city. And so it felt kind of seamless to do that in terms now of focusing on my education as a PhD student. And so although it was really hard to put myself out there at times, I think I grew into what the community is now online, and I feel way more comfortable than I did at the beginning. I do think I policed myself a lot at the beginning because I was new to being a PhD student, and a lot of politics go behind that. And I felt like I needed to really shield who I was. But when I started opening up a little bit more on social media and becoming more comfortable, I think that's when I really saw the connection with other people online.
Can you explain a little bit about where you're at in your PhD journey? Because I think like we think about college and like undergrad being 4 years, typically 4 years, and then you can go to get your master's, and then we know that like the PhD program is after that. But sometimes we don't really visualize how long it takes or how long you're in a specific program. So can you maybe break that down?
Yeah, so I can share about my educational trajectory. I did undergrad in 4 years and I got my bachelor's in social work and women and gender studies. And then straight after that, I went into my master's program, which was 1 year. It was an advanced standing accelerated program. And so master's programs are typically 2 to 3 years, depending on the length of the program and whether you go full time or part time. So my master's was 1 year accelerated full time. And then I'm now in my PhD program, and PhD programs vary by the field that you're in. And typically, there are some programs that kind of have it set up where you finish within 5 years. So, 5 years is like, I would say, on the shorter end of completing a PhD program. Like, that's a quick turnover. And for my program, it's 6 years and on, but I'm in my fifth year and I want to finish. I'm planning on finishing up this year. So I actually made a post about this recently. I've been in college for 10 years. This will be my 10th year. And so it's been a really, really long journey. So I'm trying to wrap it up this year for sure.
Yeah, and are you working while you're going to school?
Yeah, I've always worked since I was an undergrad. So I've always worked part time. Undergrad, there were times where I held different positions that accumulated to like working full time with like campus jobs, interning, volunteering, and stuff like that. In my master's program, I also worked two part time jobs. And since I've been in my PhD program, in conjunction to getting my funding. So I have funding for 5 years. That looks like a tuition waiver, and I have a teaching assistantship. So I've worked part time as a teaching assistant and also held research assistant positions. And now I'm in a fellowship. So that work looks a little bit different, but I think it's equivalent to working a part time research job.
Can you it like it all sounds like so much to organize and like dedicate specific time to. But I know that you've been in school for 10 years, so I'm sure you've gotten really good at organizing and scheduling all the things. But can you give some tips or just like some advice on how you do it? How you manage to schedule and organize all the things in your life while also leaving room for like a social life and having fun?
Yeah, definitely. I think exclusively to my PhD experience, it was really difficult for me the first 2 years. So the first year, I felt really overwhelmed because although I was coming from a master's program, the jump in terms of the coursework and the expectations, I would say, is drastically different. And so as you go into graduate school, like the workload looks more and more. And so my first year, because I was coming from a social work background, I felt pretty behind in terms of what was fundamental to the field of sociology. So I felt like I had to do a lot of catching up in my classes because my peers came from, they already had somewhat of a background in the field. And so it was my first year. I was figuring out being at a new campus, being in a new field, getting adjusted to the workload. I think I didn't have any structure my first year. Like I was working 7 days a week. I was reading all day. I was writing papers because I was trying to figure things out as I went. And I felt like I was getting adjusted and I didn't know like who to turn to right away on like, do I ask my peers for help? Do I ask my professors for help? I did have friends who were also going through their PhD program, so that was like really helpful in kind of comparing our experiences and helping each other out. And I also leaned into other mentors that I had from undergrad and my master's program. And so I did have somewhat of a support system, but I definitely was super unstructured my first year. My second year, I got a little bit more confident and felt more adjusted. But then COVID hit and everything was online, and I felt like there was no way that I could actually focus on school when I felt like there were a million things happening in the world. And so my third year, I was kind of in the background for my program. Like I was doing what I had to do. I was showing up for my classes and doing my work, but we were in quarantine. So I just felt like like I didn't put that pressure on me to work as I had in the past. And so for me, being in quarantine and COVID hitting was a step back for me to like chill out because I was always on the run. I was always doing too much. I was going to campus every day, like doing so many things that obviously that took a toll on me, but it felt like my normal. Like it just felt like things that I had to do. And so being at home really helped me get accustomed to a slower life. And so I think since then, now I'm in year 5, I've prioritized the things that I need to do. So I recognize that I have a schedule. Like I should look at my PhD like if I was working a 9 to 5, right? Sometimes we put in overtime, but for the most part, I try to structure my day by the week, if not by a couple of weeks, just to like plan meetings, do stuff like that. So I prioritize the things that I have to do, but I also recognize that I'm a one person show. And so in academia, you have to do a lot of things by yourself. And so even doing research, I have to do so many things that in the outside world, there's a whole team for that. But in academia, it's just me. And so I look at my PhD as a job. I work 9 to 5. I schedule the things that I have to do. And once I feel like 5 p.m. hit or I just can't do it anymore, like that's it. You know, I can only do so much and I don't want to spread myself thin as I have in the past. And so I just have learned to really take a step back. That was the hardest thing for me. And like I said, like before COVID, I was doing so many things. And so being quarantined really like put me in a position to prioritize myself and live a slower life than I had in the past. And so yeah, I think like tangibly, I just schedule out my day. I do what I have to do, and I think I've been content with that. Before, like a couple years ago, I would have not been okay with that. But now, as I'm well adjusted in my program, like I am totally fine with doing what I have to do and calling it a day.
And are you still having to go into classes, or has that changed since the pandemic? Like, are there more classes online now?
Yeah, a lot of things are hybrid. But for me, I finished my classes on my third year. So I finished my classes during the beginning of COVID. And so I haven't been back to campus. Like I don't need to be on campus. So I've been remote since COVID hit. Which has also been a transition, like from showing up to classes every day, working in person to like now being completely remote. I think that has also like bought me a lot of time because I'm not rushing in the morning to like get ready and like commute to class and like be in class, walk around campus, like that takes up a lot of time. And so now, like, I do my morning routine, I do the work that I have to do, I can make lunch when I get hungry and stuff like that. So that has definitely been a really big benefit for me in my program, is being able to work from home.
It seems like you have really gotten a good routine and rhythm to your life, and which is um, inspiring because a lot of times, like, it's hard to fit in everything that we want to do. I think the pandemic for a lot of us helped us slow down and realize that we wanted to be more intentional about the time that we're giving our job or our schooling. And so now in 2023, now that we're like 3 years past the beginning of the pandemic, I'm I'm finding that a lot of people are like in this middle ground where they're like, okay, well, I want to go out and do a bunch of things, but I'm also like used to just staying at home and chilling out. Like, it's I've seen a lot of like TikToks and memes about how it's like when plans are canceled, like I'm relieved that I can just stay home. Um, so it is good to hear from you and how you really prioritize your time and organize your schedule. When you think back to when you were younger, what were your goals and aspirations when you were young, like a kid? Did you think that you would be where you're at now?
Yeah, I definitely didn't think I would, because I didn't know the possibilities or the extent of the things that I could do. And so when I was younger, I wanted to be an elementary ed teacher, which is initially what I got into for undergrad before switching to social work. And so picking social work, I think, had a lot of ties to what I mentioned earlier about community organizing and being out in the community. And so I really enjoyed doing that community work, being out there and connecting people to resources and stuff like that. But I also felt like fundamentally my passion had always been in the classroom. And so I think I learned as I was going through college of what a master's was and what a PhD was. And so as I gained more knowledge, I kind of circled back to my initial passion of education and teaching. And so I'm really grateful that I was able to explore my opportunities in the times that I was in college, and just like learning about what it means to go to graduate school, what it means to do these things. And so, because I wanted to eventually end up in the classroom, it made sense for me to do a PhD. And so, I've been fortunate enough to have taught two classes already on my own in my PhD program. And I think those experiences really solidify that this is what I want to do. Although I am still a PhD student and there's so much that I have to do, I always found that prepping for classes, being in the classroom, was something that I really enjoyed, is like being in the front of the class and lecturing and helping make like these assignments and reading people's papers. Like, I think that really reassures me that this is what I want to do. And so I've been really fortunate to have those experiences. So I definitely didn't think that this was even a thing. I think as a first gen, I initially thought I was going to go to undergrad and then get a job. I didn't know what grad school was until my last year of undergrad. And so I've been able to learn from other people that are ahead of me of like, you can do this and you can do more school if you want. Um, so that has been really great in my experience.
So, what did you do to celebrate that first time that you were up in front of a classroom teaching? Because that is huge, especially knowing that, like, as a little girl, that's what you wanted to do. Like, that's really exciting. What did you do to celebrate?
Yeah, I love to celebrate like the small steps like as I go. I think I'm trying to so my first class was 2 summers ago, and I think I celebrated as I went. Like I remember I went to get dinner when I finished week one. So I was like, okay, finished week one. Like, this is a new adventure. And so I like to celebrate as I go and like really recognize what it is that I'm doing. I remember I made a TikTok in my car after the first day that I taught. I was so nervous, and oh my God, it was a 8 a.m. summer class. So it was a really hard schedule. And because I mentioned I had been remote since the beginning of COVID, it was my first time really being on campus to do a class on my own. And so I was really worried. I was like, oh my God, I have to wake up at like 6 o'clock in the morning, get ready, go to campus, like set up the classroom and stuff. And I was really nervous. But I remember I made the TikTok in my car and I was just like so excited because I wouldn't have imagined that even like a couple of years ago. And I think because I'm at um I'm at an HSI, so I'm at a really diverse school. There are a lot of students of color and there are a lot of Latino students. So I think the experiences of being able to connect with other students, specifically other Latino students, is like an amazing feeling because I've had people throughout the class or even after the class when they evaluate me like just say like that they are really happy to have an instructor that looks like them. And so I think that is like a really heartwarming feeling. And so yeah, I like to celebrate as I go.
I'd love to know if you have experienced imposter syndrome or um, anything like that as you've navigated through your higher education. I know that that is really common with first gen uh, Latina students, and so if you're willing to share, I'd love to hear your story.
Yeah, I think in the last couple of years I've really challenged the idea of imposter syndrome. And so undoubtedly I've always felt unsure. I've felt stressed or just like really uncertain about certain things, especially as I mentioned, my first year. I was really overwhelmed because I wasn't sure what I was doing, didn't know who to turn to. So I was really stressed about that. But I think like I've let go of the marker of imposter syndrome because I am first gen. I'm figuring things out as I go. So I like to buy myself a little bit more grace and just say that it is not because I've failed in any way. It's just like a new experience that I'm going into. And so I've definitely have grown into a more confident person, which has been reflected in my professional identity. I think as a first generation Latina, there's not a lot of Latina scholars, not a lot of Latina faculty. And so it's breaking barriers. It's like paving the way for new representation in higher education, which we need. And so I have dealt a lot with just feeling very uncertain about things. And I think at the beginning of my program, for example, I used to stress out about sending an email. Like, I didn't know if it sounded professional, if it was like passive aggressive. Like, I didn't know how to ask for things. I felt really shy and I felt like it would come off as wrong or something. And so I struggled with small tasks of like sending out emails, but I think a lot has happened personally in my life that has sort of put me in the face of like you kind of have to like just learn to grow, right? And so I've been in therapy to address a lot of things that I feel have hindered my success at the beginning. And so, like, dealing with depression, dealing with anxiety, and just like learning how to be a human and learning how to be a young adult. I think after doing a lot of self work, going into therapy, that really like shifted my perspective on a lot of things. And I felt like it was like a new beginning for me. And so now I'm like definitely more confident. Like, I look back and think about how I used to spend 30 minutes reading over an email. And now I'm just like, hey, like, I need this. Can you help me out? Stuff like that. Like, I'm quick with it now. And I remember, like, I would be so nervous to ask people, like, hey, I haven't gotten paid yet. Like these are things that I needed. It's like I needed to get paid and I didn't know if that was going to sound like rude coming from me asking when I'm going to get paid. But now as soon as I see things like I'm not getting paid, I'm like, "Hey, I haven't gotten paid. Can I have an update on this?" Or, "Hey, like I didn't get paid for these hours that I worked. Can you like look over payroll again?" So there has been tremendous growth that I'm really proud of. So I definitely will say that I was not like this at the beginning of my program, even the last couple of years.
It seems like the people around you and in your program have been really supportive. Is that true? Or have you experienced like biases or microaggressions that you've had to navigate through?
Yeah, I thankfully personally have not dealt with what I would think of as like microaggressions in my program. Not to say that it doesn't happen. Even in my program, I have heard of it, instances that were not supposed to happen and stuff like that. So like there have been people who have unfortunately had really bad experiences. I personally haven't, and I'm really grateful for that. I think I have definitely always looked for people who I can feel like I can trust and lean on and vent and ask for support. And so within my cohort, there is another women of color. And so I've heavily relied on our friendship to like get us through the program. That has been really helpful, as well as other peers, not in my department, but outside. And so a lot of people who have been supportive of my journey I've met through social media. So building friendships across my physical boundaries have been really beneficial, as well as my other friendships outside of academia and my family. Although my family doesn't isn't able to give me like that academic or professional support, I think they have been socially and emotionally very supportive, and that has been really helpful.
Yeah, I know it's encouraging when you have your family and friends like there to support you, even if they can't support in all aspects. Like it's just nice to be able to go to their house or like for dinner or um, call. I always call my sister on my phone or I text her when I need like some emotional support. Um, so, with your wanting to wrap up your PhD program, what are your goals for when you finish?
Yeah, I am working on my dissertation right now, which is the last step of being in a PhD program. So that has taken up a lot of my time doing my independent research, but I'm also in the process of applying to jobs. And so I have opened up my options as to what type of jobs I'm applying to. So I'm applying to higher education jobs as a faculty, so being a professor, teaching sociology, but I'm also looking into higher education administrative jobs. So like working at diversity programs, working at cultural centers and stuff like that. Like still being in the university space, but working with students at a different capacity. I'm still looking to teach, whether it's full time or in in connection to being in an administrative job. So those are my two options in terms of being in higher education. But I'm also open to other jobs outside in industry working on research.
And can you imagine like not being in school after being in school for 10 years?
I honestly can't. Like I've heard from other friends who finished their programs, like even thinking about friends who finished their masters or their bachelors, and like leaving that identity of a student, I've heard has been really difficult. And so because I've been in school for so long, and honestly after this, there's really no need for me to go back. I could go back if I wanted to, but I do not see myself doing that. And so I don't think I can even fathom the idea of not being a student anymore. I know it's going to be a really big transition out. So, yeah, I feel like that's going to be a journey on its own when it comes around, is what my life is going to look like when I'm not in school and when I'm not under these circumstances. Because as I mentioned, it's a one person show. Like, there there are so many things that I'm doing independently that I know in the outside world there's a whole team for that. And so I'm curious to see the transition out. And honestly, I feel like the workload will be less than what I'm doing now, because I've always done so many things simultaneously. Like, being on research projects, doing my own research, applying for things and stuff like that. That is always an ongoing cycle. And so I know when I leave that as a student, it's going to look drastically different.
And what will you do to like celebrate your big accomplishment?
That is something that I've been thinking a lot about. Even when I started my program, I was already thinking about how I'm going to celebrate, just to give me some inspiration and motivation to keep going. But now that that feels a little bit closer, I honestly always envisioned this like as a big party, a big celebration. And I've seen on social media people share that they do their graduations as if like it was like a wedding, right? Like that type of big, of like having a registry and stuff like that. And so I just imagine like a really big celebration. Like, I'm thinking of like family, friends, like having a grupo, having like so much celebrating, because it's been a long journey, and I think like that's the least that I deserve right now.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds like very um fitting. I think like as Latinos, especially like I'm Mexican American, but there's like we celebrate big, like everything, and you're inviting your whole family, and their families inviting their family and friends. So that is exciting and really like exciting and great to look forward to once you're finished. I think more people should do things like that when they finish a huge accomplishment like this, because like for weddings, like there is a lot of celebration and you're buying things for the couple and so that they can start their lives. But like finishing, whether it is your bachelor's or master's or a PhD, like that is huge. And you also could use the support for when you're done with that. So I really like that way of celebrating. Is there anything else that you're working on that you want to share? Like, I know that you do a lot on social media as far as education, as far as sharing your journey and offering inspiration to others who are in the same uh, or looking to be in the same type of journey or are in that same type of journey. So, are you working on anything for?
Yeah, so it's application season. Applications for grad school opened up, I think, in September, and they usually go up until January, February. And so, although I am really busy right now doing my dissertation, I didn't think I was going to do this, but people reached out and asked if I was doing mentoring this season around. And so I tried to fit in a couple of one on one mentorings. So that's what I've been doing. I've closed it, but I plan on opening it up again during winter break. So I've been sharing online a little bit about like one on one mentoring for people that are applying to graduate school and need help on their statements. I also have available a workshop on how to write a competitive personal statement. So it's not a one on one, but it's like a self guided tutorial that goes over how to write a personal statement. So, those are two things in connection to graduate applications. But I'm also working on having more events in Chicago. And so, in this month, I want to do a community like socializing event like the one that we met up at the rooftop social. So I will be working again with Gigi and Noemi to create an event before the holidays really kick in. So sometime at the end of this month, I'll be sharing more about just like getting more Latinas in the city to network and connect with one another. So that's just one of other things that I hope to do for the new year to come. I really enjoy doing like in-person events. I think it's a really good way for me to branch out of the academic bubble. I feel like being in one space can be very overwhelming and draining. So it's really nice to meet new people, meet other Latinas in the city, and like learn about all of the cool things that they're doing. So I'm hoping to do more of those things in the future.
I know after the pandemic and we were in isolation for so long, like I really value in-person events, especially if they're like small and intimate, which is why I really like the rooftop social. I got to meet a lot of new people and really just appreciated that time and the space. So I know that a lot of people are also valuing those small intimate gatherings and are ready to like hang out for a few hours and get to know people. What encouragement or advice would you have for the next generation looking to continue their higher education journey?
Mm-hmm. I would say to not be embarrassed to ask questions or ask for help. I know oftentimes that can be a little bit difficult when you don't know what to ask for or when you kind of just don't have an idea of what's out there. But I think just putting yourself out there, asking questions, meeting new people, I think is really helpful because when you hear about other people's experiences and journeys, that has you thinking about the possibilities of things that you can do. And so I think asking for help on how did you get this opportunity or what does this opportunity look like can be a really good starter for you to think about like education wise if you want to go to graduate school or career wise like what can get you there. And so for me, leaning on my networks has been really beneficial. I still keep in touch with my undergraduate mentors. They have been tremendously supportive and we still meet occasionally, like we catch up for dinner. I let them know what I'm doing, and although they're not, I would say, helping me in the steps that I'm doing now, like I can't ask them for letters of rec or anything like that, they still have been really helpful in encouraging me and being really supportive. And I know if I need anything, I can always ask them. They'll connect me to the people that I need to be connected with. And so that has been really helpful in just like keeping alive all of the relationships that I've made throughout the way and not being afraid to just ask questions and ask for help. That can take a lot of practice because even in my experience, it took me a long time to really think about, okay, like I can't do this all by myself. And so that would be one piece of advice that I have.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I think the more we talk about like the more we encourage people in their journeys to like
Mhm.
hey, ask for help, it's okay, the more we talk about imposter syndrome and how to
Mhm.
navigate it, the less common it's going to be and the less afraid we are going to be to ask questions. And so
Yeah.
I am always appreciative of people sharing that advice because I know the more we hear it, the more likely it is that we're going to actually apply it to our lives. So thank you so much.
Mhm.
I'd love for you to share where people can find you, where they can connect with you on social media.
Yeah, I am on Instagram and TikTok as Grad Conmigo. On Instagram is usually where I'll first post events. So that's where you can see about like any future in-person events that I'll be co-hosting.
Awesome. And then if they want to work with you on one mentoring, also
Mhm.
through social media?
Yeah, on both of my platforms, I have the link in my bio on like where to sign up for the mentoring.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your willingness to share your story. I am so inspired by people, and well, especially Latinas who are going into the higher education fields and showing that representation. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for all the great questions.
All right, we will talk soon and hopefully we'll be able to meet up at an in-person event soon.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, bye. What an encouraging conversation with Aide. We can't wait to celebrate with her when she officially finishes. Okay, amigos, thank you so much for listening. There'll be a new episode every Tuesday, so after you listen, feel free to take a screenshot, post on Instagram, and tag at Elevating La Cultura, or send me a DM. You can also comment on this YouTube video if you're watching online. I always like to hear from people and how they resonate with the stories that I share. So leave a review on Apple Podcasts so we can get more ears listening to these stories and we can continue elevating la cultura. And if you haven't heard, I'm hosting an end-of-the-year workshop for all my jefas called Planeando con Strategy. It's going to be a time of reflection and reset, pero we're making it fun. Join us on Zoom. The replay will be available on December 13th, starting at 6 p.m. We are going to get all up in your business, assess all what went down in 2023, and get a good plan set for 2024. All right, enjoy the rest of your day, afternoon, evening, whenever you're listening, y nos vemos next week. Bye.